Hello, everyone. Thanks for listening to Wake Up, Look Up, a podcast where we connect events happening in real time to the gospel of Jesus Christ. I'm Zach Wyrock. And in today's episode, we're talking about prisons of the future. And we're asking the question, can we change people? This is prompted by a pretty cool thing that came out recently, a short film by an artist and scientist who was kind of daydreaming about where advancements in technology, particularly neuroscience, might take us as a society. And he was kind of envisioning a product he called Cognify, which potentially could take the place of prisons. The thinking goes like this. When someone commits a crime and we put them in prison, we're spending a lot of time and energy and money for a person who really hasn't changed. But what if we could hook them up to a machine that could change them without them really having to do anything? That's the idea of Cognify. You hook them up to a machine, and what it does is submit them to psychological experiences that they've not otherwise had, even going so far as to implant artificial memories into their brain so that they actually change their thinking. You could reinforce negatively, for example, experiences with drugs. You could envision crimes that were committed from the perspective of the victim. The film is asking the question, could we accomplish in 5 minutes of Cognify what we can't seem to accomplish in 20 years of incarceration? What if prison was no longer necessary? We could just change someone's brain. It's an interesting thought, and it's one that 50 years ago you might have thought was far out and ludicrous. But does anyone not think in the next 100 years we're going to have the ability to do something like this? Technology is advancing, and when technology advances, it opens up new possibilities. And in some ways, it's the role of the artist to ask whether or not those are good or bad possibilities. And that's the question, isn't it? Should we be thinking of things like this? Would something like Cognify, the ability to change a prisoner's mind without them really even knowing it, replace prison? Well, it's kind of a mixed answer, to be honest with you. On the one hand, this idea is disgusting to me. On the other hand, it's interesting to me. Let me explain what I mean. On the disgusting side, this is a problematic idea for a number of reasons. First of all, the only reason we punish someone is not because they need to change. There's an element of punishment that has in mind valuing the victim. If you murder someone in my family, simply hooking you up to a machine and making you think differently about violence is not ultimately satisfactory to me as a victim. If my family member mattered at all, then their blood requires some kind of atonement. It requires some kind of justice. But also, this isn't actually changing people. Changing someone by implanting memories they don't have might change behavior. It's not ultimately changing them. Change is often a slow process. It's the process of a number of painful experiences that prompts us to go through the cycle of introspection and repentance and behavior change. We're short-circuiting that with something like this. We're making something technological, which is fundamentally spiritual. The gospel is the only way ultimately of changing people because it requires me to come to terms with what I've done, with the justice that I deserve, with the God who can mete out that justice, but out of his great love and mercy for me has sent his son to take my place. That change can be slow. It can be deliberate. It can have peaks and it can have valleys, but it is also actual change, real substance and real behavior modification coming from a heart change. What Cognify is seeking to do is to short circuit things, and that actually reduces them down to something that isn't actually real. In that way, this would be awful. But the artist is hitting on something that I think is true, and that is that we have long since abandoned the idea of rehabilitation among the incarcerated. The truth is that no one really champions those in prison because politically, who cares, right? They can't vote. And so it's much more important, our politicians think, to come out as strong on crime than to recognize that we have thousands of people incarcerated who are made in the image of God, and abandoning them to a hopeless, pointless existence, to no future, to no sense of personhood or progress is, I think, to reduce them down to animals instead of people. I'm against technology taking the place of real change. I'm against technology taking the place of discipline. I don't think the Bible would reinforce either one of those. But what the Bible does tell us is we can't abandon our brother simply because he committed a crime. Don't forget in Matthew, when the Gospel of Matthew, when Jesus separates the sheep and the goats, those who are really his and those who aren't, one of the things that makes the sheep is that when he was in prison, they visited him. People in prison matter. And I think we should, as Christians, be thinking about ways we can inspire them to become people who are different, to become people who live lives of purpose and meaning. I know it's not politically advantageous, but when have Christians let that drive our actions? We should care about these people because they're made in the image of God. We don't need to hook them up to a machine, but it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if the church took seriously the work of hooking them up to Jesus. Hey, thanks for watching this episode of Wake Up, Look Up. While you're here, make sure you click like and subscribe so you get future content from Wake Up, Look Up. And hey, leave a comment below letting us know what you thought or interacting in some way with what you just watched. I'd love a chance to talk with you more in the comment section. And also, while you're here, check out all the other content CCC puts out, including the videos that are around me right now.